Hello everyone, and welcome to my new series I Have Never Seen, which as the name suggests, I review movies that I have never seen before, specifically older films that get voted on by all of you. For the inaugural video in this series, given that Christmas is only a couple of short weeks away, I decided to have my review be for a Christmas movie. I gave you all 5 options, and the one you voted on was the original Miracle on 34th Street from 1947. If you would like to help decide what future videos will be about, please consider subscribing to my channel, and be sure to watch out for posts on my community page. All of the reviews for this series will be decided by the polls that I feature on that community page. Anyway, I thought it was appropriate and well timed that Miracle on 34th Street should get selected for this video, because I saw that a theater local to my area called Pollock Cinemas was playing it for just a few bucks per ticket. By the way, check out this video if you live in the Phoenix area and want to learn more about that theater. So, on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, I went to this theater with my wife and parents. This was interesting to me because neither myself or my parents had seen it before, and my wife was too young when she first watched it to really remember what happened, so it was a fresh experience for all of us. Needless to say, I was low-key blown away by it. Over the years, I've deemed a handful of Christmas movies to be classics that always get played in my house each year, but Miracle on 34th Street honestly has a shot at being added to that list. I'm excited to lay out the reasons why. First and foremost, for those who are unfamiliar with the film just as I was, the story begins just as the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is about to get underway. A crucial problem, however, is that the man playing the role of Santa Claus shows up to work as a drunken fool. Circumstances line up perfectly for another man named Kris Kringle to assume the jolly role. Not only does he take the job on the spot, he has the exact physical appearance and demeanor to play the part perfectly. Soon after, he's hired on as the person to portray Santa Claus inside the flagship Macy's department store on the titular 34th Street in New York City. But people begin to notice that there's something different about this man, to the point that both kids and adults begin to suspect that he may in fact be the real Santa Claus. It's that point that stirs up controversy, and ultimately, the main conflict that drives the rest of the plot forward. What I just described may seem like it doesn't have much at stake, but I was compelled by this story from beginning to end. I often hear the complaint that a movie is uninteresting simply because it's black and white, and honestly, I do wish people would give older film more chances. I mean, for crying out loud, my favorite film of all time is a black and white drama from 1946. Sure, there are some aspects of old Hollywood filmmaking that bug me a bit here, such as some of the expository dialogue, dishing out information to the audience in unnaturally sounding ways, and there are a few too many cross-dissolve edits, some of which start transitioning before a scene is really ended.
Would you sit down and I'll be right back and sign your pay voucher?
But I accept that these were techniques of the time and that I shouldn't scrutinize an older film too much for that. In fact, one way that Miracle on 34th Street actually transcends the time it released in theaters is that it's pretty mature and poignant for a movie of its time period, especially for one that the whole family can appreciate. If we consider historical context for a second, the period right after World War II would have been a very difficult and cynical time to live through. Yeah, the United States may have been one of the victors of the war, and far better off than pretty much every other country that participated in it, but Americans still paid a tremendous cost. Aside from how many people died during the war, the ones who were left mourned the fallen, and the war would have permeated through all of culture, politics, and social issues in the years thereafter. But I'm not a history YouTuber. My point is not necessarily to paint a picture of the socio-political climate of the late 40s. What I am saying is that Miracle on 34th Street has this quality about it that really makes it more meaningful when you consider the purpose of its story against the backdrop of the world at that time. No matter when you watch it, the film's story is wholesome, funny, and founded on good values that promote kindness and goodwill to your neighbor. You know, what people call the true spirit of Christmas. A lesser movie would use its conflict of, is Santa real or not, to just play into the fantasy and maybe make some Hallmark greeting card statements on kindness. But in this case, the matter of whether Santa Claus is real is not this movie's rosebud question. Kris Kringle's very nature and how he affects those around him is where the foundation of the conflict rests. You see, in a post-war world, the idea that kindness would heal the wounds of society might seem naive, but not to this movie, and certainly not to Kris Kringle. Each of the characters he interacts with, whether they be major or supporting players, are benefactors of his selfless nature. Even if he's not the real mythological figure that he claims to be, the fact is that this character is written as someone with an infinite capacity for good and almost a righteous hatred for those who would do harm to others. It's this core intrinsic commitment to values that enables this movie's depiction of quote-unquote Santa Claus to maintain such a magnetic screen presence. Every little thing he does, the nuances in his dialogue, and the character's truly good-hearted nature allows him to set a firm example for everyone around him. It helps that British actor Edmund Gwenn brought such life and energy to this iconic character in a well-deserved Oscar-winning performance, but nonetheless, I found that this movie is more concerned with the attributes of Santa as opposed to whether he's truly the man he claims to be. That's why once the movie inches closer to its third act, where Kris Kringle's livelihood depends on whether his identity can be proven, there's a genuine sense of something being at stake. At this point, I cared about Kris Kringle himself, but more importantly, I thought about all of the people whose lives he had touched. We come to know various individuals throughout the runtime whose lives were one way prior to meeting Kris Kringle, and then after meeting him, are forever changed. I would equate him to Uncle Iroh from Avatar, not just for being a lovable and jolly old man, but for the fact that a 5-minute conversation with either of them could alter the course of your life for the better. Because of that, I think it's important that the first half of this movie is dedicated to just seeing how Kris Kringle affects everything and everyone around him. After all, it's not an astounding display of magic that wins people over. Rather, they just see him embody what Santa should be, and are mesmerized by his behavior. That scene where the Dutch immigrant girl sits on his lap and they sing in her native language, that's enough to melt your heart and convince you on the spot. But on a more crucial level, the film doesn't forget to have central characters who are affected by all of this as well. While not quite as compelling as Kris Kringle himself, the three main characters, a single mother named Doris who works in a management position at Macy's, her daughter Susan, played by the late Natalie Wood, and their next-door neighbor Fred Gailey, have a stake in whether Santa is real or not. Doris and Susan clearly have some history of tragedy in their lives, given that she raised her relatively young daughter to be more of a realist that looks past the silly fantasies that blind children to the truths of the world. There may be merit to that parenting philosophy, but over the course of the story, you can see how their interactions with Kris Kringle encourages both mother and daughter to lead more hopeful and charitable lives from that point on. Do you see why it would be important for this movie to hinge its climax on whether Kris Kringle is a man of his word, or just some old kook? If the latter is the case, then what kind of lasting effect would that have not just on our main characters, but everyone else who Kris helped out? At best, it would be disappointment, and at worst, perhaps disillusionment with the moral values that someone like Kris Kringle promoted through their every word and deed. How that all ends up resolving itself, I won't get into details here, since I don't want to spoil the experience for those who haven't seen it. But as a whole, the film finds a way to resolve itself in a way that you could argue is magic, but not how Hollywood would try to spin it nowadays. Additionally, you could read into the film with a faith-based lens, specifically with how simple everyday interactions with Kris Kringle mirror how the people in the Holy Land came to believe in Christ as the Messiah, just by listening to his words and seeing him perform miracles rather than through heavenly manifestations of power. I mean, there's literally a line where the judge ruling the sanity hearing for Kris Kringle is likened to Pontius Pilate.
And I'm telling you to get off this case.
But why?
Because you're a regular Pontius Pilate the minute you start, that's why.
Oh, I don't believe it. I'm an honest man, and nobody's going to hold it against me for doing my duty as
Are you sure about that?
Even if you don't view the film in that way, Miracle on 34th Street is a well-acted, intelligently written, entertaining, and emotionally impactful comedic drama that fervently believes in the human spirit. It's a movie that the world of 1947 needed, and it's certainly one that the world needs today. There's so much happening around us that I can understand one feeling powerless as they take it all in. But that doesn't mean that you have to let your fears and anxieties control you. For those things you do have a direct effect over, such as your family, friends, neighbors, and coworkers, go outside your comfort zone and do something nice for them. Do good to everyone you encounter and try to find ways to love and support them. Then maybe that one small thing you say or do can be the one thing to turn someone's life around. Miracle on 34th Street reminded me that there is power in kindness, and during this Christmas season, it is my hope that you will come to know that for yourself as well. And that's it! This was fun! Thank you for giving me the chance to try something new here on the channel with the first video in this series. I definitely look forward to making more of these. If you liked what you saw and would be eager to see more of what I have to offer, please consider subscribing to the channel and joining the notification squadron so that you won't miss out on my future videos. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video as well, please keep a close eye on my community page for when I put up a poll for deciding what I review for the next installment in this series. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you all have a great one.